Good morning. Thank you and welcome once again to the South Dade Chamber of Commerce, excuse me, South Dade Chamber of Commerce Shoutout. Today, as usual, we will put a spotlight on one of our members. And today, we're going to have Drake Peterson. Not we're going to, we have Drake Peterson from Peterson Harley Davidson. And you want to say Peterson Harley Davidson South, but really it's Peterson Harley Davidson. Okay. And everything that I'm hearing is, up and coming. You're the man. Welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you, Les. Thank
So,
you so much.
tell me, what is it like, first of all, to be a Peterson from Peterson Harley Davidson?
It's interesting. I've been in the motorcycle world. I like to say my whole life. Learned to ride a motorcycle when I was 3 years old, so it's in my blood. I've been on rides my whole life, sitting in the sidecar with my parents, riding behind my grandfather on his bike. So it's been a world of riding, and it's not just Harley Davidson either. It's anything on two wheels. Obviously, I do have a strong inclination towards the Harley brand because that is my family and my heritage. But if you're riding a motorcycle, you're a friend of mine. So
Excellent. And I really do appreciate that. I've been riding for 40 years, and I have switched from brand to brand, just depending on what I was trying to do. Obviously, if you're riding off in the woods, or I used to ride through the cow patties over in Fort Myers, you're not looking for a heavy, center of gravity street bike, but something with a lot of clearance. But it's something that really, to me, it's in my blood, so I get that totally. Both of my sons ride. And so it's not just exciting, but sometimes it can absolutely be relaxing. So tell us about you.
all right. So I'm a Miami-born native. Been here my whole life. Graduated from Palmer Trinity, and I went to college at University of Miami, and I actually got my mechanical engineering degree from there. Studied really hard. It was a really hard school. Made a lot of friends. And after working in the mechanical field, I worked for an MEP firm for about a year and a half. I'd always been around the Harley business too my whole life, ever since I was a kid. Starting from when I was like 10 years old in summers, sweeping the floors, washing the windows. Then I went to the parts department when I was old enough to use the computer properly, selling parts in the back service area, selling parts in the front area. And then once I went to college, I was getting close to graduating high school, about to go to college. And I don't know, I'd always been like really interested in science and math and just technology in general. It always piqued my interest. It still does to this day. So with that in mind, I decided to study engineering. I don't really use the engineering skills that I technically learned in college now. But a lot of the math and science that I did learn helps me tremendously today. Also did some minors in management too in college, and that also obviously helps with managing a dealership. But besides that, I love to do a lot of action sports. I've been, like I said, if I'm riding motorcycles at 3, that means that my family is, not afraid of daredevil type things. So I've been skateboarding, wakeboarding, anything, boating, diving, scuba diving, everything. I just love being outdoors, and I love the thrill of adrenaline and having fun. So
Excellent.
that's me in a nutshell.
You threw a couple of things at me just now that, again, are near and dear to my heart, especially when you mentioned diving. I spent my entire adult life as a diver, as a working diver. I teach diving. If it has anything to do with underwater, I'm there. If I could ride my motorcycle underwater, I'd be doing that. I actually do have a couple of scooters, and someone had asked me once, why do you have two? I'm like, because they do different things, and you have to understand that. And motorcycles are the same thing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The same way. They have different purposes, and so again, there's a connection. And I got to tell you, I'm excited about you. I'm excited about what you bring, not just to Harley Davidson, and we'll get back to that, Peterson Harley Davidson, but to the community. I was involved with an event not too long ago called the Young Professionals, and there were a group of I call them kids. You guys are all young enough to be my kids. but it was exciting. It was refreshing to see a group of young adults that were so into what they were doing, and as far as advancing not only their business and connecting with their parents, but the community. And that actually, and everyone knows I'm all about our businesses here in South Dade, but I'm also all about our community. Can you tell me a little bit about what Peterson Harley Davidson does and what they're about as far as reaching out and doing things in the community?
Yeah. So one big thing that my grandfather always harped on was obviously community outreach and charity. Our big charity event every year is the Key West Poker Run. He started that in 1972, and it's still running today. It's the 47th annual this year. Had a couple years where we didn't have it because of Irma or some other things. But his big thing was always charity. We do multiple charity events all year. We actually just had a charity event at the dealership on Sunday. It was a scholarship and trunk party for college-bound students from the local community. We had some students from South Dade, Robert Morgan, just a lot of students that were in a tough financial position that needed scholarships. And that was an event that Rubenstein Law, Sugar for Kids, a lot of different sponsors came, and we all came together and helped 20 students out with some scholarship money. So again, we do a lot of different events. We do some Christmas toy drives. And like I was saying before, though, our big one is the Key West Poker Run, and that has raised money for a lot of different benefactors, the biggest being the Diabetes Research Institute and the Key West Rotary Club. And the big thing that the Key West Sunrise Rotary Club donates to and does is scholarship money for college students. So that's always been our thing. We actually have a really soft spot in our heart for a lot of the homeless children too in Miami. I don't think a lot of people realize how many there are. But just at Southridge alone, I think there's around 110 that go to school at Southridge that are homeless. And a lot of them are absolute scholars, athletes. I mean, it's not their fault that they're in the position that they're in, and they really are doing everything that they can to get themselves out of it. So
yeah, and 110 in the scheme of things, when you think of population, doesn't sound like a big number, but the reality of it is, when you're talking about kids that are on the street because they don't have a proper place to lay their heads, that's a huge number.
Yeah,
and for you guys to be involved in that is tremendous, and I really do. I appreciate that, and I'm sure the kids do. But it's good that all of our listeners hear that also, because they need to know that you're not just a bunch of motorcycle guys, and that's a perception. It's funny because I have the majority of my staff rides motorcycles. In fact, I have a couple of photos that I want to put up here of there's Mr. GQ Mark, our marketing director, and his bike. And the other photo is a photo of me, and that was me just after a couple of months on the keto diet, out in front of my house, But we do ride, and just because you ride a motorcycle doesn't mean that you're in a certain caste or a certain group. Okay, for me, it just means that you like the feel of the wind in your face and bugs in your teeth, and maybe the feel of freedom. But we always have a sense of responsibility. If you look at these poker runs, and for instance, the Key West run, we'll talk about that in a second. Those all have a purpose. It's kind of like we're riding. Sure, we ride to relax and everything, but more times than not, we get together and we do things and we ride for a purpose. So let's talk about the Key West run. Okay, that's coming up here. Actually, our ride is coming up before that, but let's talk about the Key West run. What's the history of that?
Yeah, so back in 1972, it was actually originally started as a way to drum up business for my grandfather. In the summer of riding in South Florida, you ride too. It's hot in the summer. It's not that pleasant to ride in the summer. You got a 450-degree motorcycle between your legs, especially Harleys. They're air cooled. They're a little bit hotter. It's not that fun to ride in the summer. So him and one of his good buddies decided to basically start a ride from Miami to Key West, and they did it in the summer during the slow season. Also, the slow season for Key West. Most people don't go to Key West during the summer because of the same reason. It's so hot down there. Mm-hmm. even closer to the equator than we are up here. So it was basically a way to drum up business and just get ridership started. And, once they started with like 12 people the first year. I mean, it was just a group of friends that rode, but just word of mouth. And, this is before internet or Twitter, Instagram, any of the social media. Just
smoke signals.
Yeah, smoke signals for starting the ride. And they used to have chase vehicles that would go down back in the late 70s. And, it really just started as a word of mouth ride for everyone in Miami. And it just got bigger and bigger every year. And it really helped Key West a lot in those tough months, in that late August, early September. And it was always traditionally the third weekend of September. But actually for this year, we're changing things up a little bit. We have it on the first weekend of October during Columbus Day weekend. And that's going to be from October 8th, 9th, and 10th. And we also changed it up a little bit even more. It's not technically called a poker run anymore. And the whole premise for everyone that's listening that doesn't really understand what a poker run is, because I didn't until I was really old enough to understand. But you basically play poker by stopping at different spots and pulling a card. So if you ever played like 5-card stud or 7-card stud, that's exactly what it is. You buy a hand, you stop, you pull a card, whatever that card is, it gets marked on the card. And then the top hands basically would go to a finale, like show in a way, in Key West, where the top 10 hands would play another game of Texas Hold'em with big cards on the stage. And then that's where we'd give away a grand prize. So our big draw to basically have everyone donate to the charity was we always gave away a Harley Davidson motorcycle. We'd raffle it off. Well, it's not really a raffle, but we would, give it away for charity, and everyone would buy these poker hands to play to win the motorcycle. And we also would sell t-shirts. We'd have some other raffles and things going on too. But that was the way that we really raised money for charity.
I have to chuckle at that because so we're having a poker run, and we're going to still call it a poker run. It's exactly the same premise. The difference is that each of the riders, and quite frankly, we're not only limiting it to motorcycles, but you can drive. We'll stop at different businesses that we've pre-selected, and then you'll pull that card. And then when we get to the end, which is going to be at Snebley's, all right, then high hand wins. Now we're giving away a watch, not a motorcycle, but it's a cool watch. It's actually a very expensive watch. So I'll have to, it'll take us a while to get up to the point of giving away a motorcycle, but that you have me signing up for that one. But the whole idea is to get folks out, get them doing things, get them into community. And there's usually always a purpose. And just like the way your grandfather started that ride down to Key West, it wasn't a gang. It was a group of people. Hey, you know what? Let's do something. Let's accomplish something, And so, again, the same way, that's the same thing we're doing. By highlighting certain businesses, all of the businesses are members of our chamber, just like you guys are. And it'll have folks, I don't want to say force them, but it will cause them to at least stop in and say, oh, I never even knew this was here. Okay. And then we'll end up with a celebration down at Snebley's, and we'll eat and break bread and have a great time responsibly. And then we'll head back. But exciting. Very exciting. We've moved our event to the 18th of September, which actually coincides with Exit 1 Tap Room's anniversary. So that's actually one of our stops. And so they have a few things that we'll be doing there just for fun, and we're not advocating partaking in adult beverages because you still have to ride a little bit more. So you can, after the event, stop by and see Breezy and her crew and have a great time then. We're also very excited, Drake, about you guys making your pavilion up in Cutler Bay available to us for different things. You have Gabrielle that's working your events and everything, and he's just incredible guy. Big ups to him and what he's doing as far as making sure that excuse me, the facilities and things that you guys have there, we as a community can use, and at no charge. Okay, and that's huge. And I really do appreciate it. He's over in the back there making faces. So, but your staff in general, and that was actually something else. We looked at you guys, researched it not as a a means to whether or not you were going to join, but we wanted to know who you guys were. And I was thoroughly impressed with the level of professionalism, not only in your sales staff, but your service staff, the level of diversity, not only in your sales staff, but also your service staff. And that's what we want to see down here in South Dade and all of Dade County. We're very, very diverse, and we're very proud of all of our heritages, and so you guys are right on point with that, and I appreciate that. Um, your grandfather's legacy, fill me in on that.
Yeah. So I'll actually take it a step back further from my grandfather, because his legacy was paved by his own grandfather too. So my great 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 grandfather, three greats, fought in the Civil War out of Wisconsin. My grandfather's family migrated from Norway, so I have Norwegian descendants. And before the Civil War, he was a wood farmer, a wood cutter, kind of a lumber guy. And once the war started, he fought for the Union. Luckily on the Union side, fighting for, in my opinion, the good side. And actually, when they won the war in the Civil War, they really didn't have any money to give any of the soldiers once the war was over. So he was actually given land. He was given a lot of land in northern Wisconsin near Sturgeon Bay area. And once they gave him all the land, the government ends up taxing you on the land. So he really wasn't making much income to pay the taxes. So he had to end up selling some of it off to neighbors that, he felt were going to be good neighbors, good partners in business. And he started a cherry farm up there. And once he had kids, my great great grandfather named all of his sons after Philip Sheridan, the general of the Union War that won the war for the Union. And basically through about two generations, once World War I started, my great grandfather also fought in World War I, and then my grandfather was named Philip Sheridan after the great general from the Union, and he served in World War II as well. So I have a long history in my family of ex-military, and just like yourself, ex-Navy. And I thank the troops every day. I see them a lot at the dealership. I've been around a lot of ex-military in my life, and I thank their service and with gratitude, because we really would not have anything that we have today without you guys. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate that. That's the kind of thing that our troops need to hear. And sometimes it's so easy to say thank you for your service, but when you put the story behind it, when you explain that why it's important to you, okay, then that makes a difference. For me, I spent 33 years in the Navy, and that became my life. In fact, I bought my Fat Boy when I was in Iraq through military sales. And so that bike, which I still have, I have another bike, but that bike has special meaning to me for that reason. I bringing that up, it's interesting. It's almost like a perfect segue. We have another partner that has jumped on board with us, the Miami Marlins, and they are having a Military Appreciation Day, which will be September 5th at Lone Depot. And I've got to give them their props. Because I'm all about the Marlins. I'm all about what they're doing and what they're doing in the community. They're actually putting together a program. We're going to have our military members on the field. We're putting together a package so that we're going to take 200 or 300 military service members from all the branches, from all the bases in Dade County, and give them free tickets, free access to the game on September 5th. And it for them, it's a fun time. For us, it's actually putting something behind saying thank you for your service, because it really means something to us. Okay, these guys stand in front of the flag, and we need to stand behind them. So when you say that to me, I feel it. and listening to your family's history, I feel that also. And I'm glad that you guys are doing what you're doing. I'm glad that you guys own that motorcycle shop because I like going there. And
you,
so I
thank
have quite a few shirts that the staff and Gabby always make me buy. So it's always fun. Anything special that's upcoming other than the run? I know you guys do quite a bit.
Yeah. Actually, in August we have a big book bag drive that we're doing at both dealerships.
Mhm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. August 14th. Yeah, August 14th, and our Miami dealership is doing it as well.
Okay.
Believe we have upwards of 700 backpacks that we've stocked with supplies, different things for all the kids going back to school. So that's our big charity event that's coming up. And really, besides that, it's really all pointed towards the Key West run. That's our big yearly event that we're really excited about.
And you just brought up something that I totally forgot. You have 2 locations. Okay.
Yeah, we do. So yeah, I'll just go back to my grandfather real quick. So after he served in the war in World War II, served in the Navy, fought in the Atlantic and Pacific wars on USS Bears, a destroyer. He was a engine room mechanic, so he was dredging around in oil up to his knees. And once he got back, he had always been into motorcycles, even before he signed up for the Navy. And he actually ended up signing up the day after Pearl Harbor. His whole entire senior class in high school actually signed up for the war efforts right after Pearl Harbor and the tragedies that happened there. So once he came back from the war, he still had his love for motorcycling and basically just started racing amateur. He still ran the cherry farm that my great-great-grandfather started. And just on his weekends, he would race motorcycles. He actually took a motorcycle engine and made some contraption to shake the cherry trees to help get the cherries off the trees. And we all know that, Harley riders know the old engines they vibrate a lot. So it wasn't rubber mounted. It was just a hard
just lean it up against the tree.
Lean it up against the tree and let it shake all the cherries off.
That's funny.
And they actually ended up kind of mass producing these around Wisconsin because there were big cherry orchard farms around there, and they all were using these Harley engine contraptions to shake the cherries off the trees. So once he really got into racing, he started racing a lot, was traveling all over the country, met my grandmother, who he was married to for 75 years. God bless both their hearts. And he just loved motorcycling. He couldn't get away from it. He ended up racing for a bunch of different manufacturers. He actually raced for Indian in the beginning. A lot of people don't know that, but yeah, he raced for Indian, which is like a big competitor for Harley now. Right. We actually even have a picture of him in our dealership with an Indian shirt on. It's kind of an ode to the first manufacturer that picked him up. But he ended up racing and did so well that Harley Davidson recognized him, and they approached him to become a sponsored rider, but also to open a dealership in Key West at the time. And their thought was, they knew he was ex-Navy, they knew he had fought in World War II, and there was a massive naval base in Key West at the time. Just right after the war, they wanted to have a big presence on there in case, anything was to happen between Cuba or really any other spot. It's just a very strategical, location. So we ended up moving down there with my grandmother at first, and then kind of stayed there, between there and Wisconsin for a couple of years. And he became friends with this guy named Billy Temple, who owned the Miami dealership at the time. And they had an old man's agreement, or just a shaken hand agreement, that if Billy Temple was to ever sell, that he would go to my grandfather first. And so he ran that dealership in Key West for a couple of years. And once they downsized the Navy base, it was about 6 years after the war, they downsized the Navy base, so the population of Key West really shrank a lot. So in the motor company's eyes too, it didn't really make sense to have a dealership in Key West anymore. And just luckily at the same time, Billy Temple was selling, so he approached my grandfather. My grandfather sold almost all of his land in Wisconsin to scrape up as much money as he could, moved all of his kids down here. By this point, my dad had just been born, so he had 6 kids total. So at this time he had 5 kids, and moved everyone from Wisconsin to Miami, bought a house here, and then started the dealership here. And it really wasn't easy at first. It's amazing now. I'm so fortunate to see what my family has built, but there's stories that my uncle and my dad and my grandfather that I heard him tell when he was still with us. it wasn't easy. Harleys were at the time in the late, they opened the Miami dealership in 65, but my grandfather had originally been in business since 54 in Key West. But at that time, Harleys really weren't reliable. They kind of have a bad rep now from a lot of the other aftermarket, a lot of the Japanese brand guys that ride, Hondas and Kawasaki's. But there's some truth to that. The Harleys in the late 60s, early 70s were kind of archaic. They always leaked oil, then we call it marking your territory. Other people say
you always had to have a cardboard box under your bike.
Yeah, they actually purposely leaked oil onto the chains to keep the chains lubed. They weren't really leaking oil. It was all a design feature. But what's amazing to me too about all of that is that regardless of the bikes not being, the best or the most reliable, people bought them anyway, and that just goes back to really just patriotism and loving an American made company, an American made brand. And that to me is amazing. But even through that, Miami, like we were saying before, is a very multicultural, melting pot city. So there was a lot of other motorcycles in at that time. So it's not like you couldn't compare, if you were a buyer for a motorcycle, to see a Harley, you'd see a Honda, you're kind of trying to decide. But really in the late 70s, it got pretty bad. And Harley was actually facing, for everyone that knows the story, they kind of were facing financial crisis, and they actually were bought out by AMF at the time.
Right.
And AMF eventually built the engine that saved Harley. So in the late 70s, my grandfather told me stories that like they were barely making payroll. I mean, he was dipping into his own savings account just to keep some staff on board, because they just weren't selling any bikes. The bikes were not reliable. They had a lot of bad press. But then something magical and amazing happened where the company AMF that had basically for 10 years kind of ran the company into the ground a bit because they were just holding on for dear life. They actually designed the Evo engine in 85. And that motor was what saved Harley Davidson. Mm-hmm. And at that time, the demand increased crazily. There was the Terminator with, Arnold Schwarzenegger on the Fat Boy. There's all this good press about the bike. And then just mid to late 80s, early 90s, just the market for Harley Davidson exploded. And, we were able to reap in the benefits of that incredible time. And then, like we were saying before, we have 2 locations. So with the money that we eventually ended up making from Harley being so popular, I mean, it was crazy. At one point, people were buying motorcycles from us at MSRP and selling them on the street for double the amount of money that we had just sold them the bike for. I mean, the amount of interest in motorcycles at that time was incredible. And so with the money that my grandfather had made, he basically took a huge risk. And when he was 76 years old in 1994, actually the year before I was born, he bought a piece of land in North Miami on 2nd Avenue, which is where the Miami dealership is today. And he developed what is the Miami dealership right now. Mm-hmm. And was a huge risk at the time. He took basically every penny he had and leveraged it and took out a massive loan. But it really paid off. He had a great man by his side. Ace Armstrong was our general manager for about 30 years. And he helped build that dealership to be one of the best in the country.
And Drake, this is interesting for me because we had decided we were going to keep this show short. And to sit here and listen to you go through that history, it tells me, first of all, you're embedded. You are all in. And what's exciting is now what you bring. Okay, there's a level of technology. There's a level of geekism that you're going to bring to Harley. Okay, there was a change back in the 80s with AMF that changed the engine and the way those guys, the bikes went forward. But what I know and what I understand, there's getting ready to be a change in Peterson, Harley Davidson. And that change is going to be from its young vice president. Okay, I'm not going to ask you to go through all of that because it might be trade secrets. But I'm excited about what's getting ready to happen and what you're going to bring to this already successful dealership.
Yeah. It's been a long time coming in my life. Like I said before, I kind of worked in the engineering MEP field, but it never interested me a lot. I'm too into being outdoors and riding and just I love motorcycles. I really love them. I think they're everyone's favorite toy. It's one of those toys that we all have. Even my grandfather rode to is like 75 years old. I mean and I see customers too all the time that are. They just, the smile that you see on their face when they get off the bike is unmatched. it's therapy for a lot of guys. That's really why it has touched a lot of our ex-military, our veterans' hearts, is that, it's, therapy on two wheels. It's a real thing. There's actually a study I read from UC Berkeley that put, the sensors on people's brains and tested them, and they literally proved that riding motorcycles does improve happiness, that it makes people happier. It's a release, and I love selling that. I love spreading the word about riding motorcycles. For a lot of people that don't ride, it's hard to explain to them. For those that have even ridden on the back, they kind of get it. But there's just something about being in control of this machine. It's such a raw experience. It's something that you really can't get over. And since I've worked at the dealership, I've helped my family. I first tackled like the marketing department because I felt like that was, like you're saying, the marketing world right now is so technical. There are so many different avenues and facets you can get into, and that was the department that I tackled first because I felt like that was the department that was struggling the most for my family business. And now I'm really tackling more of the sales side and in the dealership, like systems and more advanced phone systems and CRMs and everything, just to tie everyone together. Because at the end of the day, what it really boils down to is communication.
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't have communication, everything is lost.
Right. So that's what we're doing now.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay? And communication is definitely a big deal. And I'm sure a lot more people know about Peterson, Harley Davidson. And I'm excited about that. Really having you here is a big deal. Having you and your family as part of our family at the South Dade Chamber of Commerce is a big deal for us. We really do appreciate you being here with us.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much. We're going to call another one to end. I want to make sure everybody, get out to the ball field. Ooh, got to get this straight. It's crooked. Get out there, okay? Support our Marlins. Get on the turnpike. Go to the field. Watch the games. Eat some peanuts. Eat a hot dog, and have fun. If you really want to have fun, ride your bike there. Okay, that'll make it a perfect day. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Les.
Great day.
Yeah. And I'll just say one thing real quick. If anyone wants to see any of the things we do, our website is petersonsharley.com. We have two Instagrams, Peterson's HD South or Peterson's HD of Miami. It's also on Facebook as well. And if you want to see anything about the QS run this year, it's also on our website under the events and promos tab. So thank you again, Les. I appreciate everything.
There you go. There's those communications. You're a pro. Thank you, sir. Have a great one.
Yeah, you too.